Okay, so this is our next learning target. This is target 2A for, this is section 5.2 in our textbook. So I'm just going to write that over here so we know. We're just doing part A, which is a special kind of solving where we use substitution. So here are the steps. We have to make sure both equations are in the y-intercept form. The y equals mx plus b. And then what we're going to do is we'll go through the steps. We're going to set the equations equal to each other, and then we solve for x. Once we have x, we're going to substitute that value, the x value, into one of the original equations, and we then find out what the y is. Once we have our x and our y, that's where we come up with the solution point. So this is another way to solve systems. Instead of graphing, we're going to do it algebraically, which for some people it's easier, for some people it's harder. So we give you multiple ways to solve it. So here's our second way to solve it by substitution. So I'm looking at my first system down here in the example. Both equations are in the y equals form. So step 1 says, since they're both equal to y, that means they're equal to each other. So I set up the equations, I make the y disappear in the equal sign, and I just set the equations up. 3x plus 2 equals negative 2x plus 7. So that's what I did. That was the step 2. I set the equations equal to each other. From here, we have a little bit of solving to do. So we're kind of going back to chapter 1 again. This always loops around, where we need to make sure we know how to do the algebra part of it. So when we have variables on both sides, this was section 1.3, we have some steps. So I'm going to take some side notes over here. So with variables on both sides, I'm writing that up here. I just want to go back over what we need to do. So we need to take the variable, so we call it the x term, one of them. On the we always take the one on the right to the left. And remember, this is where we have two choices. We can add or subtract it. So by, and then I write plus or minus. That's your only two options. And then, so that's basically when the variables are both sides, that's the step 1. So once we set them equal to each other, we have to use our notes. So I'm going to write that in there. Just refreshing. Some of you might remember how to do this. Some might need a refresher. So remember, here's our x term, the whole entire thing. This is what I'm talking about in the notes I just wrote. I take this to the other side, and I have to line up my terms. I like to draw my line down the equal sign because they're two different problems. So when I take my variable to the other side by adding or subtracting, we always do the opposite. So if this says negative 2x, I would add 2x to both sides. And remember, x's can only go with x's, so I line up my terms. These here cancel. The reason why is because plus and minus, they just cancel out. So what I'm left with, I bring down, this is a positive 7. I bring down my equal sign. And then I need to make sure over here I do some math. I'm going to combine my like terms. So 3x plus 2x's give me 5x. And then I didn't use this plus 2 yet, so I just bring it down, plus 2. So if you notice, after we do this first part here where we take the variables to the other side, we are going to solve a two-step equation. Oops. So I'm solving the two-step. And I'm just going to go over those steps again. So two-step, I'm just putting an arrow though, because this is all part of the same thing. So a two-step equation, we get rid of the number by itself, that's on the variable side, by adding or subtracting. adding or getting rid of addition or subtractions is first. Our second step is to divide by the number next to the variable. Next to the x variable. That's how we solve a two-step equation always. We've been doing this for a while, but again, we might need a refresher. So, like I had said, so now that we've moved variables to the other side, that was our first step after we set them equal. Now we're going to make sure that we solve the two-step correctly. So again, we're always working on the side where the variable's at. So step one is to get rid of the addition or subtraction. That's the number by itself, not connected to the variable. And I do the opposite. So minus 2, minus 2. And then I didn't use the 5x, so I'm going to bring it down. 5x equals, those canceled. And then 7 minus 2 in my calculator is 5. My last step, I'm going to do it in green for a two-step equation, is always to get rid of multiplication or division. In this case, for this section, you're always going to use division to get rid of 5 times x, because whenever it's right next to the x, it's timesing, so we divide to get rid of it. So divided by 5, divided by 5, they always cancel on the side of the variable, and then I get x equals 5 divided by 5 is 1. I found my x, but remember when we're solving a system, we're looking for an ordered pair. So my x is 1, but I need the y, the point of intersection. So what I do then, I go back to my notes and I'm going to plug my x into one of the equations that we started with. It doesn't matter which one. And we're going to use our calculator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one of these equations. I'm just going to pick the top one, this y equals, and I'm going to plug it back in. So I plug in to solve for y. So the equation here, so I always write like solve y, just so I see what my work is. And then I copy one of the equations down. Y equals 3 times x. 3x means 3 times x. So 3 times, what did I figure out x was? It's 1. We just said that. We plug it in. And then I continue the rest of the equation, the plus 2. And then I let my calculator do all the work. I just type in so that I know y equals, and then 3 times 1, which was my x. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5. So that is my y. So this is my ordered pair, 1, 5. So I need to do this for every type of problem. I'm going to do one more with you, and then some of them you're going to do on your own, or we'll end up doing more actually in the live streaming part. But once you do one, they're all the same steps. All right, so let's look at the next one real quick. But we're going to use all these notes, so I hope you've copied these down. If not, pause or rewind the video so that you have these notes. All right, so first step, remember, we set them equal to each other. So right here, I always tell you guys if there's nothing in front of the x, we want to make it a 1. So I'm going to set them equal. Negative 1x plus 3. That's the first equation. And then I'm going to set it equal to the second equation. 2x minus 6. Remember, our first step, if we went back up, I told you we have to take this x term right here to the other side. We always bring that one over, and you have two choices. You add or subtract it based on the opposite. This is a positive 2x, so I'm going to minus 2x from both sides. I like to draw my work in so you can see the division between the two. And then it's minus 2x. Okay? Remember, these cancel. That's why we move it over. So on this side, I'm left with a negative 6. I'm just bringing that down. I'm left with my equal sign. And then I'm going to do the work over here. On this side, I have to make sure to put my calculator. Negative 1 minus 2. That's what it says. Negative 1 minus 2. If you put that in your calculator, it's negative 3. And then remember, because the x is there, we keep it with it. Don't try to do that in your head. Just copy it down and enter it in the calculator. And then I didn't use this plus 3 yet, so I'm dropping it down. From here, once I do the very second step where I move the variables to the other side, I just have a two-step equation. So I'm going to follow my rules. I'm going to get rid of the number by itself where the variable's at, the plus 3. I have to get rid of addition or subtraction. So I subtract 3 from both sides. They always cancel on the side of the variable. I'm left with negative 3x equals, and then again, in your calculator, you would type in negative 6 minus 3. And then I would get negative 9. From here, my last step is to divide. So instead of negative 3 times x, I'm going to divide it by 3, and it will cancel. And so I have to divide this side also by 3. And I get x equals negative 9 divided by negative 3 is actually a positive 3. Again, make sure to use the calculator. And so the last part, to plug in to find my y. So finding y, again, I pick one of the equations. I'm actually, since that's a negative x, I'm going to pick the bottom equation. It doesn't matter which one you pick, but I kind of like it better because it doesn't have a negative by the x. So I'm going to do 2 times whatever I figured out what x is, I just replaced this, minus 6. Well, we figured out x was 3, so I'm just popping that in there for the x. And then I use my calculator. That's what y equals. So 2 times 3 is 6, 6 minus 6, so y equals 0. And you can have 0, 0 is a number. So my ordered pair is x comma y, 3 comma 0. So that's how we solve systems of equations by substitution when both equations are in the y equals mx plus b form.